Belonging is fundamental. It's fundamental to our well-being. We all have to be connected in a meaningful way to other human beings.
We can't make other people create belonging for us. We can long for belonging, but I love that idea of creating it ourselves. And the art of assuming belonging. If you can assume that you belong, the environment may just rise up to meet you.
I can be happy and still joyful. I can be struggling and joyful. I can be in pain and still joyful. So I see joy as emotion, but more of a value that walks alongside me during every course or every piece of my life.
You're listening to Solving for Joy. I'm your host, Dr. Chrissy Ott.
Hello, friends, and welcome to today's episode of the Solving for Joy podcast. I am so honored to welcome my dear friend, Dr. Kelly Holder, to the podcast today. Kelly is a clinical psychologist, speaker, and a deeply grounded leader in the space of mental health and well-being. She currently serves as the Chief Wellbeing Officer at the Warren Alpert Medical School of Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, where she's guiding institutional change with clarity, compassion, and courage. She is someone who walks the walk, bringing faith, integrity, and lived experiences into the spaces where healing and growth are most needed. From her early work in behavioral medicine to her leadership in med schools across the country, Kelly has dedicated her career to helping others move from burnout to restoration. In today's conversation, we're going to talk about what it means to show up for yourself, to claim joy, and to be there for your community, especially in a world that doesn't always make it so easy. We're going to share practical wisdom, deep insight, and her warm presence that feels both grounding and inspiring. And one of the things you might not know about Kelly, my friend Kelly, is that she has incredible taste in fashionable eyeglasses. So we like to call it face jewelry. I like her so much. I'm so glad that you guys get to meet her too. Welcome, Kelly. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's a privilege and an honor to share space with you in this way.
Oh, I deeply feel the same way. So we're going to talk about solving for joy today. And a fun fact is that when you got up from your chair, I saw that the sign behind you is about bold, unbridled joy. I love that you have that hanging in your office. Yeah. Tell me about your relationship to joy.
Joy, I absolutely love talking about joy. Joy, I see joy as a value, so it's something I carry with me. I'd like to tell people in the morning I dress for joy. I want joy to be present as I make choices and decisions. Joy is, it's a centering or anchoring presence in my life. And there's so many things we could say about joy, but in this moment, I just want to share that I absolutely love talking about it. And it is the thing that pretty much is an anchor to how I exist and how I try to show up in the world.
That checks out. I totally feel like that tracks. I remember the first time that we spoke at a physician wellness conference. I was just like, I want to talk to this person. I feel the joy. It's delightful.
It's good to hear that you hear that feedback.
Yeah. I also really resonate with the idea of dressing for joy. Sure, some days more than others, but like fashion is a congruent expression, right? It's like one of the ways that we choose self-expression. And when we can do it with a little glee, a little joy, a little delight, it's a life-affirming choice.
I would agree. And there's something about looking at yourself in the mirror and feeling like what you have chosen to put on expresses how you feel. I love that feeling.
Fun. So was there a time when you like became more metacognitively aware that joy was a value and an anchoring, grounding presence?
Yeah. It may sound counterintuitive, but the time in which I started to really understand the power of joy was during a very difficult time period of my life. I was struggling with a multitude of things, and life felt extra heavy. And it was during this season that I started trying to study and understand what joy means. And um, my faith and religious background is really important for me. So studying and understanding what joy meant in a spiritual context as well. And it was in this difficult season that I started practicing and accessing joy on a regular basis. And saying this out loud in this moment, it's like oftentimes when we think about joy and think about people being joyful, we think a lot about the good times and the wonderful things that are happening. But in my experience, learning what joy meant had a lot to do with me navigating difficulty and trying to understand what's the anchoring for my life, what makes most sense. And it was during that time that I found the ideals and principles around joy. And from that standpoint, I couldn't then release them. I had to keep holding on to them because it did become a real great anchoring point for me.
That is really interesting. What if you remember, details? I'm so curious about the underpinnings from your study of joy that stood out to you. I mean, joy is certainly part of praise language, but it's also so much more.
Yeah. So, I've come to find that, of course, joy and happiness, I see them as different. Some people like to put them in the same bucket. I see them as different. And joy really, in my study and understanding, has a lot to do with where we place our hope and what we can experience in the presence of pain. And so I see joy as something that can always be present, even though I'm having all these other experiences. So I can be happy and still joyful. I can be struggling and joyful. I can be in pain and still joyful. So I see joy as definitely an emotion, but more of a value that walks alongside me during every course or every piece of my life. And a lot of my joy is rooted in my spiritual beliefs, my beliefs of God, that really help me hold on to the hopefulness I have about who I am, what life can become, but also the goodness that exists at the same time of the pain, hardship, struggle, and difficulties that are ever present, are always around us.
Yeah, it's very non-dualistic what you're describing, that, one circumstance does not negate another opposing circumstance, that they exist at the same time and they do not countermand one another necessarily. Also, like in your words, I'm linking joy really to awareness. Like awareness is the sky that we can see, and the circumstances that appear in the sky are like the clouds or the weather that's passing through. And when I think of, the way you're describing joy, it reminds me that, joy is available in our awareness no matter what clouds or weather are happening.
Yeah. I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah. So we got to know each other because of networks of doing well-being work, and as Chief Wellbeing Officer at the medical school, Brown University, it's a big job. It's an important job. For many, it's kind of a dream job. And this thing doesn't happen automatically or overnight. So I would love to learn more about your story, how you came to do this important well-being focused work.
Yeah. My story, well, everyone's story is unique. So clearly it's mine. So it's uniquely mine. As you mentioned in my bio, I am trained as a clinical psychologist. My specialty is in health. So I'm a health psychologist by training. I did my postdoctoral training at Harbor UCLA in Southern California and focusing on HIV, women's health. I did some work in an adolescent medicine clinic. And when I finished that postdoc experience, I got my first job out of school. It was actually first jobs. I did a couple of things. I worked at a VA. I taught at a community college. I also had a job. I worked in a state hospital. So I was just trying to work.
You were collecting experiences, friend.
Yes, for sure. And I have stories from all of those realms. But one thing that happened as the years progressed is that I had some opportunities to work in college counseling centers. I have to share that because maybe about 10 years ago, I was given this opportunity, or I had the opportunity to apply for a position that would allow me to start a counseling center in a medical school. So I had this training as a health psychologist. I've worked in college counseling centers. I've worked in hospital settings. I've worked in state hospital institutions. And so I brought all that knowledge into this possibility of getting this job. And I landed the job. So that was exciting. But what I didn't understand at the time, and I now know, is that by building a mental health and counseling center for medical students, in the ways in which I went about doing that. So we supported our medical students, and we had graduate students and nursing students. But in building that, I found that in order to keep those students well, we needed to make sure we were supporting our faculty and staff and supporting our clerkship directors and supporting our residency directors and our residents. And so while my work in building that didn't allow me to do that in particular, I built some bridges to each of those programs, some training to help them better identify and support the folks that they were taking care of, things that could aid them in being able to see students and caring for them better. And over time, that office grew. They gave me more responsibility, and that office grew, and I was able to take care of our residents and then eventually our faculty. And it was in doing that work and then working alongside with our hospital systems that really set me up for the work that I do now. And so I count it a privilege to have this role. And I got here because of all the work I did at different levels, primarily starting with mental health support. But we know when we start supporting folks' mental health, we start supporting other areas of individuals' well-being because it all kind of converges sometimes onto mental health. So that's a little bit about how I landed in this role.
I love looking back and noticing how the universe has been conspiring all along for some future opportunity that we have no idea even exists, at the time. I mean, most of us are not 3 steps ahead in that particular strategic way, but then it looks like it was kind of magical, but it's step by step. It's just like, all of these things were necessary for this thing to happen. I also really appreciate how you described caring for the entire ecosystem around medical students, because they do not live in a vacuum. They are not an isolated laboratory animal species. They are in the real world of medical education, which anybody really who's aware of medical education is aware has been historically fraught with stresses and pressures and internal and external forces that sometimes work against our overall well-being, especially mental health?
There's a lot there, and a lot of layers in terms of when we think about supporting students and creating an environment that allows them to thrive. And we can't just make one group of people in a system thrive without supporting all the other folks. It's not possible.
It's not. We've talked about a couple of them, but I wonder if there are one or two understandings, insights that you wish more people understood about, supporting our well-being. And it may or may not be specific to the populations in your constituency as Chief Wellbeing Officer, but what do you think would be useful insight underlying our well-being work?
And this is just in terms of being able to support our own well-being or supporting others' well-being.
You could answer it either way.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I'd like to start. I'll start with just general understanding in terms of as an individual supporting our own well-being. I think one thing, there's so much well-being or wellness stuff pushed at us in the media, right? We look and there's things to buy, there's things to do. And so the first understanding I think is important is that well-being isn't some magical, purchasable thing. Our well-being in its fundamental sense has to do with just how we care for ourselves. And if we can keep it simple, I think folks might understand it better. But because we hear so much, I think oftentimes folks overcomplicate what it is and then believe it's not accessible for them because it sounds so complicated. And so I wish there was an understanding that folks had that we could just make it sound simple, that we all have the right and some ability to care for ourselves, and that it is important. I guess that's would be my point number 2, and that it is important. It's fundamental. It's necessary. It's needed. I think that's the understanding, I think, on the individual level, I think folks should have. And it sounds really simple, but if I get on my Instagram right now and I scroll, those are not the messages that are coming across my feed. And most of my feed is curated with well-being folks because I'm always looking for new ideas. So I'm often wondering what's coming across other people's feeds because that's not what's coming across mine.
Yes. I think that knowing that we all have a right to and some power over our well-being is such a good fundamental insight. It makes me curious about another fundamental, which is belonging. The importance of belonging as part of well-being, and the ravages, the difficulties, the very serious challenges of long-term grappling with an absence of belonging. Is that a theme that shows up in your work sometimes?
I think it does. It does show up. I find myself encouraging folks to create their own belonging and create community and find community for themselves. Belonging is fundamental. It's fundamental to our well-being. We all have to be connected in a meaningful way to other human beings. What I will say is, just like this topic around just general well-being, I think sometimes it gets over complicated. And so I find, even for myself, when I start getting really frustrated or worried or agitated about those kinds of things, I have to dial it back to my simplest components and say, wait a minute, where do I find belonging best? where do I already know I belong, and what community or persons are most important to me. And sometimes I have to consciously dial it back to that small group. And it's not in any way limiting myself to the larger community. But when I do that and I find what I need most, it then allows me to try to reconnect in larger groups and larger areas. And that's a practice I think everybody needs to learn how to do, because belonging in a bigger sense sometimes feels inaccessible. The hope is that everyone can dial it back and find belonging in a more small micro culture kind of way. And those connections then can propel us. Again, and this is speaking from an individual standpoint, like what we can do for ourselves standpoint. I think it's really important. It's really important that we know how to do that.
I mean, that's really our sphere of control always.
Yeah.
Right? We can't make other people create belonging for us. We can long for belonging, but I love that idea of creating it ourselves. And the art of assuming belonging, right? If you can assume that you belong, the environment may just rise up to meet you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how that has been true in my own life. As you're saying that, I'm thinking about the instances where it might have been easier for me to neglect or not think about or even put effort into places where I could assume belonging. And when I have been like, wait a minute, this is a place where I belong, how my showing up in a sense that I belong not only made me feel better, but it created belonging for somebody else. And here I was, thought I was trying to take up space for myself. And what I was doing was actually creating space for somebody else.
Yeah, you're like, I'm actually just holding the door open.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that gave me a little happy chill. Seems like a confirming sign. I am curious today about joy and decisions. You mentioned using joy and experiencing joy when you make decisions. I want to know more about that. I have thoughts about it and I have curiosity about it. What does your brain want to offer us about that?
Yeah, it's so funny because I don't know if you've read The Art of Tidying by Marie Kondo.
Oh, sure did.
Who talks about like touching items and deciding.
Does it spark joy?
Does it spark joy? And if it doesn't, like maybe you need to get rid of it. And I think it was in reading that book that I realized that I could bring joy into my decision making, you know? And I talk a lot about being aligned with our values when I give these talks about just all the talks somebody with a job like mine has to give. And being values aligned. So joy is one of my values. I've learned about sparking, like making these decisions just with clothing and other items from reading this Marie Kondo book. And so as much as possible, I try to allow joy to be on the rubric, you know? And because joy is not a fleeting happiness, joy is part of my anchoring for what my life is, both in the present and long-term joy. I can have joy in the moment, but joy can also be something I'm hoping for the future, for a long-term plan. It's comparable because I don't have to make an exchange for, well, do I want to have joy now or joy in the future? Joy really helps with long-term and immediate decisions as well. So it is good for me, I think, when I add to the rubric, but it's something I'm still working out. Like, I don't know if I get it right all the time. I'm still I'm still working it out as a component of all the decisions and the decision making that I do. Some decisions are a little more complicated than others. And so it's like, okay, where does joy fit in here? You know, others, like, what am I going to put on today? Joy is on it. Now, I don't know if it's too much to show your folks, but I need to show you the shoes that I'm wearing today, right? Okay. So that was an easy choice, right? Yes. Joy, I have sparkle up here. Clearly, I'm going to put on my sparkle shoes. That was an easy choice where joy was involved.
Those do spark joy, for sure. As you describe that, I think a lot about what Martha Beck calls and what I understand as kind of like our internal compass. So we're listening for an embodied yes. And I think that joy also has an identity as a resonance or a vibe, and that our bodies can feel it, even if it's not just an intellectual thing. You know, this is it's much deeper than that. It's not just the, do I like it or do I not like it? It's not, aversion or, desire. It's like, is this harmonious with me? Do I vibe with this? And does it also create a sense of delight? So my definition of joy involves meaning, alignment, and delight. And the delight is the sparkle. Those shoes are delightful, and they happen to be aligned with how you feel today, right? I think there's something deep about having it be part of our embodied experience as we go through decisions. When I talk to coaching clients about decisions, one of my rubrics is, it starts with, does it delight you? And it's not a total game stopper if it doesn't delight you, because we're adults, we do have to make decisions that sometimes do not delight us. But let's pay attention. Does it delight us? Is it aligned with our mission and values, our own personal sense of mission and value? Do we have time and space for it right now? Do we agree with what it costs us or others? And do we agree with what not choosing it costs us or others? I find that helps me make joy-aligned decisions. What have you learned about leading change in spaces that were not necessarily originally designed to center wellness?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think the first thing I'll say that I've learned is that number one is that the ultimate goal, like to build a culture of well-being, is one that's a slow process. But just because the process is slow of the system or the organization becoming what folks imagine it might be, is slow does not mean that we cannot create pockets and opportunities that create an improvement in what we've been doing or pockets that and opportunities for people to be more well. So while the path we're on might be a longer journey, it doesn't mean that being well is out of reach while we're on this long journey.
Yes. We can still be well rested. We can still be well fed. We can take breaks. We can find community. We can dance a little. Yeah. You talked a little bit at the beginning of joy being present even in heavy times and in heavy places. What is joy like for you right now in personal life and in leadership role?
In my personal life, joy is a lot about connecting with the people who matter the most to me, the time that I spend with them, and the time I spend developing connections with others just in the world. And also, again, I talk a lot about my spiritual, religious life because it's really important to me and grounding, and the time I spend in those communities and with my own spiritual practices. I think those are important. When I think about the work I'm doing, it's interesting because just last week in my last week's newsletter, I spent time talking about joy in that newsletter and talking about how finding joy is different from toxic positivity and simple practices everyone can do to access joy. Because these are things I think we need to talk more about. In fact, the first line of in this part about joy says, we need to talk more about joy, or we don't talk enough about joy. I think that's the first line
That's a great opening line. I love it.
In the whole communication about joy.
Yes. That's so good.
I'm trying to bring more of this into my work and to the folks that I spend time with and that I support. Because I think it's important. This is like the real work of life, I believe.
Yeah. I know that you're also a mom, so I imagine that a lot of your joy at home has to do with connecting with your kids, significant other.
Yes, for sure. They are.
How old are they?
I have teenagers, so they're 13, 15, and 18.
Nice. Exciting times.
It is. There's no limit on excitement right now. There's all sorts of excitement.
I also really feel like how much you embody joy, and so I'm sure that you are ministering joy all the time just through your presence in the world. I feel and experience that.
No, that for me, that is the hope. That is the hope, and that is my prayer. This is like how I hope to continue to be in the world. I think there's some goodness in me showing up with this value. And there's, we all show up with something. This is the thing I can show up with. And so I guess I feel like I need to say is that it's important that all of us show up with the values and the goodness that we have.
Right. Like, this is what I have access to, and I am happy to share it.
Right? Because each of us are needed. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you like to share more, a little bit about your faith and your history with your faith?
Sure, I would love to. I grew up in a Christian home, and that Bible-believing Christian home, and I have it's hard to put into words. I have like this incredible faith life that is like the whole anchoring of my existence. So I believe like my access to joy comes because of my love in Jesus and the power of the Holy Spirit. I am extremely grateful. These are things, I was taught about as a kid, but over the course of my life, in my own studies and my own development, relationship. It's just been amazing. It's been amazing to have this life where I feel that I'm empowered to share my joy with other people. I mean, it's just like nothing like it. I don't know how I could live any other way, because it's been absolutely amazing. Not that I shared earlier, I went through some really challenging times in an experience. And during that experience, just learning how much access I had to joy. One of the narratives in the Bible that I studied during that period was about Naomi, who was a woman whose husband, her sons died. She was left with her two daughter-in-laws. She told them to leave them. She was going to travel back to her home of origin. One decided to stay with her. But what's really interesting is this woman, Naomi, when she got back to the country that she was from, she told the people, don't even call me Naomi, call me Mora, because I had so much sorrow. And in studying that story and how her daughter-in-law was able to bless her just by her existence and showing up and trying to build a family, a life of their own, Naomi's sorrow turned to joy. And in me studying that story and the deconstructing of those scriptures, I could see how even in something painful, that there's this hopefulness that could come out of something that seems so terrible. And it paralleled some of the experiences that I was having. And it's become like one of my root anchoring stories from the scriptures that just reminds me that joy is ever present, even in sorrow. And I seek to access that joy on a daily basis. And I'm just extremely grateful. I am extremely grateful, extremely grateful.
Oh, gratitude is a shortcut to joy. So it's kind of self-extending. Thank you for sharing that and how that impacted you. It's nice to know all these deeper resonances, my friend Kelly. What are you excited about in your wellness work right now? What's on the horizon?
On the horizon. Oh, wow. That's a good question. This year has been, what's on the horizon? I have a well-being symposium that's coming up in 2 weeks that I've been planning for a while. That's going to be virtual. So I'm really excited about that. I work with some of our well-being leaders in our clinical departments, and we work together to put it together. This will be our second annual conference. And so we've had to make some shifts. And so it's virtual instead of being in person, but I'm really looking forward to that because it's always nice when I can bring well-being folks together. We just tend to be a great group of people to get together. Yes. So I'm looking forward to, and being at an institution like ours, they're not people I see on a daily basis. So I'm looking forward to pulling them together and having this symposium that we've been working on. And then we're gearing up for the end of the academic school year. And so it's always exciting to hear how the students have matched and where they're going. Today I had a meeting with our third year students. They're in their last week of like a clinical skills course they take before they start clerkship. So they start clerkship next week. So that's an exciting time and trying to keep a pulse on them of what they're needing in terms of their well-being. So we're at a juncture of change for a lot of our students. We have new residents are going to be coming in July. So just kind of gearing up to greet folks as they make transitions and changes and trying to make sure we have some adequate support and systems available to them.
It's giving me flashbacks to, clerkship time in my own medical training. And many of our listeners know this, but for those who don't, part of your medical training is you go through these clerkships where you spend 4 or 6 or 8 weeks, usually it's 4, in a particular specialty. So just imagine changing jobs, locations, bosses, and colleagues every 4 weeks, and learning like a whole nother, today I'm a junior internal medicine doc. Tomorrow I'm like a junior surgeon. The next week, I'm a junior psychiatrist. The next week, I'm a junior, family medicine doc. So it is a time full of so many challenges, such a vertical learning curve. And it's a place where our ego certainly gets a challenge. because even though we study a lot, it's pretty hard to be masterful at each of these topics in such close succession. And they're all really important to create a well-rounded physician who's going to subspecialize in, one of those areas, whether it's a broad area like general medicine, family medicine, or internal medicine, or pediatrics, or a super, super specialized area. It's so helpful to know a little bit about each one of these specialty areas. I haven't visited that time in my brain in so long, but I have vivid memories of the switch day, like being the first day on obstetrics. And be like, okay, so today I'm delivering babies. Great. Somebody get my back. Okay. Somebody teach me something. I do not know what I'm here to do.
Yeah. That third year is definitely a telling year. Also, but an exciting year, because this is a year most people have waited for, right? We get to actually be in the clinic and do these things. So while there's all this excitement, there's also, it can be a lot of fear and challenges, because again, when you're changing environments regularly, it's just hard. You got to meet new people, new attendings every couple of weeks. It's a lot. So
it's so much stimulation. It's so much stimulation. If I could go back and say one thing to my former self, or to people who are going through that right now, it would be, if you have a tendency to be self-focused and think, how am I being experienced by others? There's room for that. But your primary job is to be a sponge. Yes, of course, nobody wants to look like an idiot. We need to do our due diligence and read the chapter that's relevant the day before. But it's really not about how you look, even though the grades matter, right? Like, it's really about absorbing, asking questions, and being part of a team that's being of service to people.
I think those are good things for folks to remember.
Yeah. And that you are a human being and you have a right to say ouch if somebody's actually being psychologically harmful to you.
Yes. Yes.
Remind the occasional toxic attending, hi, I'm a human. I'm here to learn. My learning may slow you down. I'm so sorry for that, but could we please just refocus that I'm here to learn and serve, and maybe not harm each other, please. And any last words about solving for joy for people who might be stuck in the heavy places right now?
The one thing I would encourage around solving for joy is to allow yourself to be open to joy, no matter what you're experiencing. Part of getting to joy is being open to it. And sometimes when life is really tough, we struggle like with gratitude or anything that would open us up to the possibility of joy. And so I would just encourage you to maybe even be curious about how joy might show up at the same time as you experiencing whatever's going on. At least try a little curiosity.
I love it. I think that is super good advice. Thank you for talking about joy with me today. So sweet to have you.
You're welcome. I was glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. May your work go smoothly. May there be much joy.
Yes. I wish the same for you.
Thank you, my friend. We'll see you soon.
Thank you again to Dr. Kelly Holder for this grounding, generous conversation about joy as a practice, a presence, a value, a way of being in the world. I hope you're leaving this episode with a little more room to breathe and a reminder that you belong just as you are. Next week, I will be joined by my friend and colleague, Dr. Paul Utan, a physician who walked through burnout. found unexpected healing in acupuncture, and reconnected his purpose, his ikigai, through coaching. We'll talk about energy, medicine, and what it means to rebuild a life that truly fits. If you're curious about how coaching could support your own journey, 12 by 12 Remastered might be for you. It's open now, and it's our hybrid coaching container for clinicians and people of all kinds ready to reclaim what matters most. You can schedule a free exploratory call anytime. The link's in the show notes. And if you're a coach, healer, change maker looking for community, you may have heard we're gathering in November at the Physician Coaching Summit. Check it out at thephysiciancoachingsummit.com. You belong. If today's episode moved you or made you think of someone else who needs to hear it, I'd be so grateful if you'd leave a review and share it with someone. This is how the work ripples out, reaching more hearts, one honest conversation at a time. Huge thanks, as always, to our creative crew, Kelsey Vaughn, Alyssa Wilkes, Shelby Bracken, Dennis Kishcook, and a big thank you, as always, to my partner in life, Sue. And you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. May you find a little joy waiting quietly in the places you've almost forgotten to look. We'll see you next time.